We're rolling live. I think I've gone through my checklist. We've done everything but have fun, I believe. So we'll get right into that. Welcome to EM 660, Engineering Management Theory. So whether you're someone in our graduate program focusing on engineering management, or for some crazy reason you just decided to take it, didn't have to, you took it as an elective, or for whatever reason, I'm glad to have you. In course, I thought I would spend the first part of class kind of giving you an overview of what to expect for the course, and then we'll kind of, since this is a one night a week double length course, we'll jump into a little bit of teaching. Try not to get too heavy the first class, but that's my plan for the evening. So I'm Nick or Nicholas. You can call me either. I don't really I'm fine with either. I don't get into the whole doctor thing too much. My mom called me Nicholas. Pretty much everybody else in my life calls me Nick. I'm fine with either. When you start playing sports, your name gets shortened really quick. It's easier to yell one syllable names than multi-syllable names. So I've been since childhood. I go by either. I am fine. I'm a local, homegrown, grew up about 50 miles south of here. Um, got all my degrees here. So one of the weirdos in academia who got all my degrees in one place and am teaching there. So kind of grew up in the department. I'm the lead for the engineering management program here in the industrial and systems engineering and engineering management department. I think we have the longest department name on campus, as far as I know. I also, the vast majority of my career at UAH was not in academia. It was in research. I'm the director for the Center for Management and Economic Research, which is actually in the College of Business. And so for the first 19 years of my career, I was a research engineer, and my background is in lean production systems. So the Toyota management system, and so had some external funding from federal government, from state government to work with manufacturing companies. So the early part of my career for 19 years was traveling around to manufacturing companies all over the country, a couple other countries, trying to help them implement principles of the Toyota system in companies that were not Toyota, and had a lot of experiences with that. My career's kind of been every decade, I feel like I end up doing something else. I was an engineer for about a decade, and then an engineering manager or research director over engineers for another decade. Then I got silly and decided to get into faculty in academia. After that, I think this is my 7th year of doing that. I came over into the department when they decided to resurrect the engineering management graduate. So we did that in 2019. Fall of 2019 was the first year we started back engineering management. And then my second semester, COVID happened. And so that was like, oh, the game changed a little bit. The rules changed in academia. And so here we are. But yeah, my background's in lean. And then as I progressed through my career, I realized as you start to, and that's kind of what this program's about, as engineers start to implement technical aspects of our world. That's what we like, right? As engineers, we're technicians. And then pretty soon you do a good job and you mess up and get promoted, right? It's like, dang it, now I'm not an engineer anymore. They're telling me I'm a team leader over some engineers, and I don't even know what that is. And so, like, the same thing has happened in the work world. Like, we would implement lean at the operational level and the process level, and then you can only have so much success until you run into leadership issues. And you have to look at that as well. So started growing from just implementing it in manufacturing companies to all types of industries, and then grew from implementing just at the ground level to at the strategic level, started doing strategic planning with companies and leadership development. That's kind of what my professional career looked like. So a lot of the things I'll be teaching and talking about are things I did with companies or learned through my career, telling crazy stories and things like that. outside of work and academia, you're never really off the clock. We're on the clock, really. So when we do have spare time, I love animals, dogs. This is the first time in about 18 years. My dog Daisy passed over the holidays, so I'm dogless for the first time in a long, long time. So still adjusting. I'll take a break, but I love animals. I love them more than people. No offense, but it's just the truth. I like Formula One. I like most sports. I'm a fantasy football geek. Won two out of the three leagues was an issue. Um, and trained Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for about 21 years. My body's starting to break down a little bit. I do it less than I used to, but still something that I enjoy. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit of background in case you're wondering who this crazy bald guy is up in front of you talking. And um, I look forward to getting to know the rest of y'all as we go through. I know some of you have already gotten into Canvas and played around with it. Some have done some of the participation badges, including the kind of introduction, hello, my name is badge. We shared information. There are two truths and a lie. I've got some good liars, are really interesting people. One of the two, or maybe both in class. For those of you that have already done that, great. If not, it's still open for a while. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the course and how it's going to be structured. We'll kind of go through that. This is the kind of the cornerstone course for engineering management. It's kind of the one that gets you started. Like I said, my professional career was studying and researching and implementing the Toyota system. And the Toyota system represents their key tenets as a house with a strong foundation and supporting pillars so that we can get the roof, which is results. And so when I started thinking about putting together the engineering management program, because I was the only engineering management faculty there for a few years, I was like, how do I want the courses to build off of each other and complement each other? Well, the EM 660, this course is the foundation. It gives us engineering management theory to help us understand things, and then the other courses kind of grow from that. And I'll look at that in a minute. But we'll look at engineering management, and ultimately what becomes engineering management over and how it's progressed over the four major industrial revolutions. It's kind of how I'm going to structure it. And look at it from the three P's. How did it change from a principles standpoint? How did management principles change over those four industrial revolutions? How did the role of the engineer change in terms of processes and technologies that were being developed and deployed during the different industrial revolutions? And ultimately, where things cross between management principles, engineering, technologies, is the people aspect. How do the engagement of people in the processes start to happen? And so we'll look at that and see how it progressed. So the way the course is structured, there's four modules. Module one will be the first four class sessions, and so including today. And we'll do an overview of engineering management today and next week. And then we'll look at the first industrial revolution in classes 3 and 4. And then module 2, 3, and 4 will be the second, third, and fourth industrial revolutions, respectively. And we'll look at all the engineering and management aspects and how they merged during each of those times. So 4 modules that we'll work through. I think I have module 1 published now in Canvas. There's 2 delivery types, 2 sections of the course. I merged them, like I was saying offline before I started recording. There's 3 types of students I usually have. Ones that come in person. I greatly appreciate that. It's hard to teach without an audience. The people that will join live on Zoom, I've shared a Zoom link and I broadcast live. I will say, for those of you on Zoom, I am terrible at paying attention to the chat during class. So, like I said, I'm crazy enough to try to simulcast. Fully as mediocre at teaching to all three of the audiences in person, live on Zoom, and then the class sessions are recorded and made available for those that want to watch it offline and can't participate live. So if I will say to the people on Zoom, if there's a day where I forget to share my screen or something like that, please speak up. If you have questions, if you want to interact, please don't hesitate at all to chime in, because I'll probably miss if you raise your hand on Zoom or say something in the chat. So please just talk. I'm very informal. I'm pretty dang country, as my grandpa used to say. So don't mind you interrupting. I love the interaction. Like a lot of the vast majority of people in engineering management are working professionals and full-time and part-time students. And so you all bring interesting perspectives and experience to class. So sharing those is always welcome and appreciated. Because when left to myself, so I talk for a living, right? And so when left to myself, I will talk to fill in time. But that doesn't mean I'm trying to. If you want to interact, please do. I welcome and I encourage it. There's no way to properly anticipate how a comment can organically lead to really valuable conversation. And there's a lot of experienced and people with interesting backgrounds in the course who take advantage of each other by trying to pick each other's brain. And I will welcome that. Just interrupt me and say, Nick, be quiet. Throw something at me and say, I've got something to say. And I'm cool with that. I'm giving you permission to throw things at me. So, please, if you want to interact, I do welcome it. There'll be weekly module content in addition to the course that's also added. So we use one book and it's very subtle. It's small. You can tell I've worn mine out. Got to keep it together. Radical Candor. But that's not really just the textbook. The vast majority of we're going to use Radical Candor to guide us through some things in the course and the case study project that we'll do. And kind of then there's a lot of other readings and videos and things that I will share in Canvas for your consumption. So kind of the anti-academic, I'm not big on textbooks. When they're scanned, right? They're expensive. And then usually by the time something gets in a textbook, it's either outdated or written by somebody that has never done it, at least in the management field. And so like I value other sources of information a lot of times. And so Canvas is your textbook, I guess, is to say. Like there'll be a lot of articles in there, a lot of readings. That is your textbook. So if you picked up Radical Candor and said, wow, how are we going to drag that out all semester? It's just one piece that we're going to use. And I will share my notes, instructor notes. So a lot of the things I've put together myself. And I'll get those into Canvas at least the day before class. I'm always changing something, adjusting something. So I don't put them out there too far ahead, usually, because I know I'll just think of something that I want to change and have to go back and redo it. So we'll take a look at that. Like I said, we're going to use this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And Kim is a very interesting person. She was an engineer, but also had been executive for Google, Apple, done a lot of tech startups, and she's kind of a no-nonsense person. And the subtitle to Radical Candor is Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Using Your Humanity. And so I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And so I've really grown to like the book. It was introduced to me a few years ago, and I've grown to really like it and integrate it into the class. So we're going to use it as reading because the concepts of Radical Candor are great to shape us as managers and leaders. We're also going to use it as a reference point. So we'll cover it. We'll use the first two classes to do about half of the book, chapters 1, 2, 5, and 6. Then we'll revisit it in module 4 to do the other half of the book, but we're going to reference it in between as we introduce a lot of different management concepts that evolved over time, and always go back and say, how does that match up with the radical candor view of things? But we're also going to use it as a guide to practice through assignments, a critical management skill, which is giving guidance and receiving guidance as a boss. So we'll use the book, it gives tips on that, and then we'll use that as practice and assignments, and I'll cover that in a bit as well. I didn't do this to you in the first class, but the way I do my notes is you'll have blanks in your notes, similar to this slide that I'm showing. When I'm presenting, those blanks won't be blank. The words that go in it will be red, so that way it kind of stands out. So one thing when I started teaching, I always wanted to teach through the eyes of a student. Like, I remember what it was like to be a student. I remember things I liked, I remember the things I hated. And so I kind of teach my class toward my style of learning, for better or worse. But what I remember when I was a student is if I was trying to write everything down, I wasn't listening very well. But if everything was given to me, I'd kind of check out. So this is kind of a happy medium of that. If you've got the blanks, then you can follow along. It also kind of hits the visual aspect. Red kind of reemphasizes what's there. And then when you actually go through the act of writing or typing or however you input it, it kind of reinforces several ways of learning. And then also just usually what I have blank is what I think is important. So it just was another way to reemphasize. So for better or worse, that's how I do my notes. Like I said, I didn't do that for the first class's notes. They're filled in for you. So that would be a jerk thing to do, is show up the first day and there's blanks in it without giving you a warning. So that's the way I'll do things. So grading wise, each of the 4 modules will have what I call an exit exam, and it'll be 50% of your grade. So once we complete a module, the exam will be online and it'll be available in a 24-hour window, and you'll be able to do the exam that day. Usually you'll have about 90 minutes once you start taking it to do the exam, and it's handled online. The way I do my exams, and I'll re-emphasize this when it gets time for the first one. Usually, it's mostly multiple choice. Usually 70% of it's pretty straightforward. I call those C questions. Like, if you come to class, you fill in the blanks, you watch the lectures, pay attention. Like, those are pretty straightforward, 70%. Another 15% or so might be a little more conceptual. And then another 15% is more critical thinking. And those are the ones where you stare at the screen for a while and have to use your brain a little bit. And that's kind of the way I do my exams. We'll talk about that in a few weeks when the first one rolls around. 30% of your grade will be a case study assignment. So it's one case study that you'll develop over 4 phases. So to be due in different phases throughout the semester. So the first phase is your first submission, which will be you'll develop, and we'll discuss this more next week when I make the assignment. But you'll develop a case study based on some principles of the course, and you'll get to pick what that is and develop it, and that'll be a first submission. Then you'll do a peer review, which means your submission will get assigned to 3 of your peers, your classmates. You'll get 3 of your classmates assigned to you, and you'll get to practice the art of radical candor by giving feedback and guidance. You'll give them guidance on how to improve their work, but you'll be practicing the techniques that we'll talk about next week that Radical Candor offers of how to give and receive guidance as a boss to your team, which I think is a critical skill. So why not practice in class, right? So I've kind of worked it into the assignment that way. So there'll be a written peer review, and I'll talk about and show how that'll work next week or down the road when we get there. And then phase 3 is after the written peer review, you'll have time to revise your original work and then schedule a one-on-one, either in person or virtual face-to-face with each of the peers who did your written peer review and kind of have that two-way feedback, which is a little different, right, than written. And then based on what you learned from the peer reviews, you can revise for a final submission. And that's the only thing like I will grade. I mean, I will grade how well you do peer reviews in step 2 and 3. But as far as your case study, I only grade it at the end. And usually, and almost every time, after it's gone through these 4 phases, I get a lot better product. Treat. And you've got to practice critical management skills. It'll be uncomfortable. Giving feedback's uncomfortable. Being managers uncomfortable. People tend to like it by the time it's done. So 50% exams, 30% case study. The other 20% will be a series of 1-point participation badges. So you've already had the opportunity to earn 3 of them. One of them was if you had just looked at Canvas before the first class started, you get a point. Sorry if you didn't, you're hearing this later, because that just lets me know you're alive. And then there's a couple that are already there, and every week there'll be a couple more that just get released. Sometimes they're reemphasizing a key point. It might be a discussion thread. It might be an assignment, like a quick go read this and do this. It might be a little quiz. It might be something completely unrelated to class, like pick the winner in the Super Bowl. So I give you, you'll get 25 opportunities. There'll be 25 participation badges throughout the semester for you to have the opportunity to earn up to 20 points of the 20%. So each one of them will be a point. So the reason I give 25 is so you don't have to do all of them. You can do all of them, but it drops the lowest 5. So you don't have to do all 25 to get the full credit. And I did that because some people don't like to have fun. And they'll be like, oh, Nick, you deprived me of a point because I didn't get the winner of the Super Bowl. I'm like, okay, do another one. So that's kind of how the grading is set up. You have any questions so far? I want to do a quick navigation of Canvas in case you haven't looked at it, or just to point out a few things, even if you have. So this is our homepage of Canvas. If you access it through the desktop, I know on devices it looks a little different, but we have a homepage, a nice welcome video. Every Canvas, is this anyone's first course at UH? A couple of them. So every Canvas course will have these buttons in the top left that are kept up to date, and that's all important university information for that every course needs. So it's in the same location of every UAH Canvas course. It just tells you how to engage with disability support services if needed, if you need accommodations, counseling center. There's just lots of links to student handbook, campus resources, the library. There's lots of stuff. So take a look at that. Important dates, the semester calendar that has all the important dates of when exams are and when to withdraw without refund or whatever that is. You can find that information there. And then we have the course syllabus. Get my information, office hours. You can always say I'm happy I try to be pretty flexible and responsive. Canvas messaging is the best way. It goes straight to my email, but like that helps me associate it with the class. Try to be responsive if you need to meet. I have office hours, you can just drop in, but I always recommend booking an appointment because that way, if you do, I'll kick somebody out of my office. To avoid that awkward just showing up while somebody else is there a moment. And if you can't meet during those times, I try to find a way to do that. Here's the Zoom link to the live class sessions and the passcode. Very clever, EM660S26. Spring 26. So, or you can access it here through the Zoom link and it'll help you. Okay. These are quick links to each of the different modules you can click. So today's doing module 1. Module 0 is kind of just an intro module to help you make sure you do the module 0 exit exam. It's just to introduce you to the course and your initial 3 participation badges. And then module 1, every module will have an overview and objectives section that kind of tells what I intend to want you to get out of the module. And then I do some writing of my own. Like I said, there's no textbooks. I do some writing and some things I want you to know. Then there's a link to each class sessions page. Each class session will have its own page. And that's where I post the notes. And so like here, next week's notes aren't up yet, but they will be, and there'll be a link just like this week's where you can click. And there's the notes for this week. And you can download them or do what you wish with. Now I'll come back to that in a moment. Just going to show you the homepage and what all it has to offer. You can print, there's a printable version of the syllabus here that you can access. If you're like me and you like the old school syllabus that you can cling to. There's tabs here. This is just the online version of the syllabus that says the same stuff. Here's the basic overview and objectives. Then you can click on the class schedule. If you want a heads up on the classes that are coming up, the readings that go with it, all the way through the semester, you have this.
Some of those are still in our side of it.
What is
sections?
What is it?
Some of those sections aren't shown in corners yet. They have the little like eyeball with the slash. They're not like activated for us.
Which ones?
Like syllabus and files.
Oh, these?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to get to them without those links.
I got you.
Yeah. There's a lot of the stuff here I use. I try to, the syllabus is the home page, and then you can access this if you want to see the grading again, remind yourself of what I was talking about. It's here. Information me, there's my Daisy. And you can again see my info and where you need to book an appointment. Course policies. You can check the attendance policies. Anything there, you can access it all. People you won't complain to if you don't like me. It's a hierarchy of people that you can contact, and it's all under the policies section. And there's actually a Canvas navigation video that's doing what I just am doing right now. This was actually one I made last semester, so it should be pretty accurate. But it just shows you how to get around Canvas, properly use the course, at least in my opinion, the best way possible. So then in the modules, like I said, you can access each course page through the overview, or you can go directly to it. So like today's class is class 1.1, and it has its own page. So I always throw some questions in there for you to be thinking about, because those are things that I hope you're able to answer as we cover things. You can also access the notes here, and there'll be a link to the recording, class session recording once it's over here, and you can also access it through the Panopto link on the left side. It'll be there, but I link it here for completeness as well. And there's reading, some stuff I've written, and there'll be some links and videos that I put in to just kind of help round out. Like I said, Canvas is your textbook. So that's how to access and find out what we have. And then also in the module overview, has all the classes for the module, and that'll take you. So like this will be class 1.4, and that link will take you to 1.4. And some modules will have, or some class sections will have sub pages as well. And then you can also, all the participation assignments you can access here, or you can access all the assignments for the course on the assignments link on the left. And that'll show you all the module exit exams once they become available. And the phases of the case study, and then all the participation badges. They won't all be available to you right now, but that's where you can find it. Any questions about Canvas? If it's your first time, first class at UAH, it can be a little quirky. You'll get used to it. I try to be as organized as possible with mine to make it as an easy flow as possible. All right, so I want to cover a little bit and go ahead and get started. Cover material. So I do know. So ever since I've taught for my graduate classes, I like to do them one night a week instead of two. Like most of the undergrad classes are 2 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. My classes are like an hour and 20 minutes. And for a graduate, I've always done it one night a week, which is double the time. I will. Maybe I should have put that on mute. Not recorded. There's plenty of other stuff to consume in Canvas, but like I have things that I want to cover. We'll cover it, but like very unlikely I'll have you sit here for 2 hours and 40 minutes. And if I do think it's going to be a long class one night, we'll take a break in the middle of it. So I'll try to be conscientious of that. I did want to go ahead, since technically the reason I did that is with working professionals, it's easier to free up one night than two during the week sometimes. So that's the reason I look to do that. I remember appreciating that as a student as well. So we'll get into a little bit of material, give you an overview of engineering management, what the heck it is, what the program here at UAH looks like, what the profession looks like, and we'll get into a little bit of radical stuff. So like I said, my background, the Toyota system, they represented the Toyota system as a house. And so when I started saying, what do I want the engineering management program to look like? I kind of did the same thing. So the foundation is this course, engineering management theory, and we look at it through the 3 Ps. What that looks like from process and technologies as an engineer, principles as a manager, and the people aspects, which is, dang it, how we have to integrate people with the technologies using the principles. Then the high level, what we're working toward is EM 747. That's the other course I teach in the program, Strategic Engineering Management. And that's how to look at our organization at the high level. How do we develop a vision, mission, values, strategy for an organization? And then EM 760, organizational structures and systems. We'll talk about, now that we have a strategy, EM 760 is here's kind of how to design our organization and our day-to-day work to work toward that strategy. And some of the different principles in there. Dr. Christine Vader teach that course. My tag team partner in engineering management in our department. So when you have her, you'll love her. She's great. She teaches that course, and that also, the bricks, then within how do we operate within our organizational structure? There's continuous improvement, but then there's also projects that go into place, and we have an engineering project management class. Dr. Jeff Williams will teach. He's a other engineering management faculty now, so they've seen not just for once. And we've got a good team, and so that's kind of how the pieces and the courses, at least in my head, I was like, oh, that's how it all works together for the curriculum. And then there's the different supporting coursework that you have some flexibility in your program to study for. So engineering management as a profession. First engineering management degree was 1908, actually. First graduate engineering management degree was in 1957. And first department totally dedicated to engineering management was Missouri University of Science and Technology, 1967. So it's not a new profession. The professional society for engineering management is the American Society for Engineering Management, ASEM. So if you want to check out ASEM, you can go to their website. They have information. You can be members. You can get certifications. You can either be associate of engineering management or certified professional in engineering management. And they also oversee the MBOC, the body of knowledge for engineering management, that basically says, hey, if you're going to have an engineering management program, here's topics that at least generally you should be touching on. So they're kind of the governing body, for lack of a better term. So if you want to check them out, they have annual conferences. I think this upcoming year, it's usually in the fall, like late September, October is usually when their conferences are. This upcoming year to be in Madison, Wisconsin, not Madison, Alabama, the University of Wisconsin. And so people will present. A lot of our full-time graduate students may have presentations or papers that they go and submit to the conference and present. PhD students very often, I encourage them to get some research out there to go make connections. The conferences are good for that. ASE. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of overview of our program in engineering management here at UAH and a little bit about what the professional society looks like. So engineering management, let's chop that up for a minute. Start with engineering. The vast majority of you are, not everybody, but a high percentage of the people are in this course have undergraduates in engineering. So engineering is not new, right? As a profession, we'll talk about how it emerged as a profession, but as a skill, it's been around for a while, right? Look, here's some feats of engineering. What is this here? The Sphinx and the Great Pyramids, right? But we still aren't quite sure how the heck they were done. Engineering marvel. What about this?
Great Wall of China.
Yeah, the Great Wall. Great Wall of China. Engineering marvel. What about this? Yeah, YouTube. Yeah. To the Nashville Zoo over the holidays. I love animals, so it's always interesting. So this is totally just off the rails. I'm just acclimating with me. So they had a kangaroo exhibit, which is always interesting. Kangaroos redeemed themselves with me. So a few years ago, I went to the Atlanta Zoo during a break during a jiu-jitsu tournament, and they had this sign over there. Kangaroos. It's like, all right, yeah, sounds awesome. I've never seen a kangaroo. I was excited. And I was like, oh, they're going to be boxing. They're going to be jumping rope. I'm like, oh, kangaroos. Heck yeah. And they were the very last thing we got. And I was very disappointed. because they were just laying around, like kind of lazy. Like they even one had his head up, propped up, laying down. I'm like, this is very disappointing. So like to see the kangaroos this time was kind of cool. Like there was one you could even here in Nashville, but so what I found out, the female kangaroos are the small, cute ones, and the male ones are the big ones that are like big, look like giant people with bellies. um, and so there were more of the females that were hopping around. This kangaroos were demons. But I would give them props. What about this? Trebuchet, I forget the exact word. The catapults. And what about this? The aqueducts in ancient Rome. So engineering's been around, right? For a while. But at the end of the day, and you'll learn this about me, I like to distill things down to its simplest form. Because I'm a pretty simple kid. I grew up in a rural area on a small farm, so like simple things make sense to me. And complex things bore. And so when I think about engineering, regardless of the discipline, regardless of civil engineering, mechanical, aerospace, electrical, computer, chemical, industrial systems, regardless, at the end of the day, engineering is using math and science to invent, design, and or build stuff. Whether that stuff be bridges, engines, rockets, processes, buildings, whatever it might be. As engineers, we are either inventing and or designing and or building stuff. And ultimately, later we'll see the role of the engineer also assume the role of maintaining and improving stuff as we go. So that's my simple definition of what engineering is. And then what is management? Can take on a lot of different things. It could be a skill set. My management of my time was very terrible. Or it could be an entity, person, or a unit. Management. It's management's fault. Management's out to get us. Or it could be a field. I am studying management or engineering management. But by definition, and again, through this definition together, but from my experience, the way I view management is systematic pursuit of some desired conditions by managing processes and leading people in a focused and concerted way, guided by some set of principles and philosophies. So those are the 3 P's that we see that we're going to study each industrial revolution by. The principles and philosophies that guided management at that time, the technologies and processes that defined engineering during that time, and the leadership principles of how we engage in organizations. So what does that require? It requires, if I'm going to pursue desired conditions, I need to know what those are. So I need to know where I want to be. Then I also need to have tools to measure and monitor where I'm at right now. And then how do I get there? Because this picture is a little deceiving. It's never a linear step from, oh, desired conditions, I know where I want to go. Oh, I know where I get there. Oh, it's just as easy as going and executing. And there's also this gray area that we have to navigate through, right? If it was this easy, we would not need management. We would just execute. But because there's this gray area, and because there are things that are going to pop up, and things that pop up have to be navigated, that is what management is. Management of the gray area in between. And so then engineering management, to me, again, I like to keep things very simple. It's doing that we just define management by, to engineering and technology-based processes. Now, is management any different for engineering than it is in general? I'll leave that question open to you to ponder through the semester. And maybe we can circle back around to it. But that's the way we'll define it. So there's a couple of paths that people end up into engineering management. My path was traditional engineering discipline. I mean, just like I talked about a little bit earlier, you mess up and do a good job and get promoted from being an engineer to being managing engineers. And then it's like, oh no, they didn't prepare me for that in engineering school because that's a whole different skill set. So that's what this program's for, to help you get a new set of tools to learn how to manage and lead. But then we also have people with a general management background. This is also very common here in especially in who end up in organizations that are very heavily based in technology or engineering. So I need to take my management knowledge and learn how to apply it to those areas of a business or those types of people. And where that overlaps is our world, engineering management. So we talked about what engineering is, talked about what management is, we talked about what engineering management is, and we'll see how each of those three things developed over time throughout the semester. It's an interesting journey. But if I oversimplified the role of management as this, navigating the gray area between where we are to where we desire to be, there's actually a lot that we need to understand to be able to do that. The first thing we have to understand is, how do we develop this notion of desired conditions? From an organizational standpoint, in other words, if I'm leading, how do I know what those are? I have to have some kind of strategy. I have to have a vision. There have to be goals. There has to be something that I'm working toward, or else I'm just existing and moving in a direction. And it may or may not be the right direction. So management and leadership involves being able to determine that first step. We'll touch on it a little in this course, but the other course I'm teaching this semester, EM 747, is Strategic Engineering Management, where we talk about how do we define what that looks like, so that at any level of the organization, when we have management trying to manage their unit, we're working toward the same thing. And it's clearly defined where I'm trying to go. Because it's kind of hard to get somewhere when you show up every day if you don't know where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be working toward. Then the second thing is, given that I might even know where I'm going, do I understand my current condition? How do I measure success every day? Do you know at your job every day when you go home if you're successful? I'm not sure I do. How do we know that? What was expected of me? Did I accomplish it? Were there any gaps? How can I close those gaps and get better tomorrow? I go to Mazda Toyota. I do a lot of work with them here in town. At the process level, it's very clear. They have X number of vehicles they need to make, 250 a shift or whatever. There's a scoreboard that says, here's our goal. Here's how many we made at any point during the day. You can see if you're ahead or behind. At the end of the day, I know what I was supposed to do to be successful, and I know what I did, and I can measure that. Do we know what that looks like for all of us? Becomes a little more vague and a little more undefined sometimes, especially if someone hasn't answered number one. So sometimes number two is hard to answer as well. Then number three, what about the gray area? Do I understand it? If I know where I want to go and I have a good idea where I'm at, do I understand the hurdles that are in front of me? What does the marketplace look like? What are my resources? What are the current issues that are facing me in my world? What are my problem solving methods that I'm using to help navigate through the gray area? So there's a lot of things as managers and as leaders at different levels of an organization that we need to understand. So that's really not as simple of a diagram as it looks. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some different ways I've seen people approach this idea of management. So one way is we may not even know our desired condition. We might understand our current condition, at least we know we exist. There's still the gray area, and there's all these obstacles. And one way of managing that is what I call whack-a-mole approach or troubleshoot. In other words, I don't really even know where I'm going. That might not be well defined. I kind of know I at least exist. There's all these things. And I just react to them as they pop up. Oh, I'm working on this until this pops up. And then I'll bounce to here. And then I'll bounce to here. So anybody ever play the whack-a-mole game or know what I'm talking about? Something pops up and you have to hit it. And by the time you swing, it might have popped back down. Something pops up over here. And a lot of times I see that management approach of just bouncing from one thing to the next. Same obstacles. Just working on them, maybe not in a concerted effort. Then there's striving, which is same situation, except maybe I have a well-defined idea of where I want to go. I understand my current situation, and I have the same gray area, same obstacles, but a way to deal with that with striving is to understand which obstacle is directly the next one in my way and not get distracted by the others. So that I've got a clear direction where I'm going and I'm focused on working on the right things to get there. And that's the mindset we want to develop. So I came up with over the years, like just different, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different types of companies, manufacturing companies and automotive and aerospace. I was telling my undergrad class earlier today about a situation I was working in a food processing plant in North Dakota and some of the stories there. And worked in healthcare, outside of manufacturing, financial institutions. So I've got to see a lot of different types of managers and leaders at companies. And you start to see some of the same personalities start to bubble up in similar patterns. So like I kind of just named a few approaches. So one of them is what I call the showman approach. And the reason I called it that is that kind of like I played baseball when I was growing up and things, and like baseball has its own weird set of rules and unspoken rules that if you didn't play it, you don't get it. And like its own culture, the managers dress like the players, which doesn't happen in other sports. And like there's the big ceremonious going out and arguing with the umpire and kicking dirt on their shoes. And that like in other sports wouldn't make a lot of sense, but it's more of a showman approach. I'm yelling at the ump and then we go have dinner. We're putting on this big orchestration, built in decades and rules of the organizational culture. We don't question it sometimes. It's a big dog and pony show. I've seen that approach in management. See that a lot in academia. Sometimes I've seen this approach, the drill sergeant approach. Just do as I say. Don't need your mind. I need your from the neck down. Usually got my authority through earning my time. And I'm going to break it down so that I can build you back up to do it our way and you don't get a lot of autonomy. Seen that approach from a lot of managers. Slightly different from that is the dictator approach. You still don't get a lot of autonomy. except the position may not have been earned through putting in more time. It may have been through seizing it, through some upheaval or hereditarily or handed down, and usually some kind of control through fear by manipulating resources, including information. I call it crimes against humanity. Hopefully, in our organizations, we're not having physical crimes against humanity, but I do believe not engaging people's mental capacities to the degree that we deserve to is a crime against humanity. If someone's showing up to work and I'm not engaging them and letting them problem solve and using their brain, then I view that as a waste. And so that's the dictator approach. I've experienced this one myself firsthand, the ostrich approach. So there were ostriches at the zoo too, and I saw them doing exactly this. What are ostriches known for?
Burying their head in the sand.
Burying their head in the sand, right? And management is like hands off, avoid conflict. If I close my eyes, it's not happening. Don't want to rock the boat. I say I use counterculture. They use informal communication. I had a boss that would do this. If he didn't like something I was doing, instead of addressing it myself, he would tell one of my peers and hope that they told me. And so very hands-off approach. This guy had a run here in the state of Alabama. Nick Saban, he always talked about the process. He had a unique run at Alabama, won 6 national championships over 17 years. And he talked about the process because he would lose players to the NFL, he would lose coaches to other teams, but still had consistent success over those years because he talked about the process, not trying to implement results, but doing the right things every day and what that really means. So some of the quotes that stuck with me, we're not going to talk about what we're going to do, what we're going to accomplish, broke up into unnecessary bullets. We're going to talk about how we're going to do it. Not what we want to do, but how we're going to do it. My favorite, don't do it until you get it right. Do it until you can't get it wrong. Discipline, follow the steps. You may not always get the same results, but the chances of getting there are much greater if you've got to define the process. Another approach to management and leadership, the visionary approach. So sometimes we have that leader, that CEO that sees the big picture, but then sees the value of having talented people get them, even when they don't know the details. The process is we know the details and we want talented people to go and execute. The visionary, I use Steve Jobs. He had some good quotes to reflect what I view the visionary approach is. People are crazy enough to think they can change the world, usually the ones who do. And it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. I know where I want to go. I need people to help me. The world I came from, the Toyota approach, I like to call a people-centric culture. They just happen to build cars. It's very ingrained in the mindset. First we build people, then we build cars. Former Toyota chairman Fujio chose that always stuck in my head. It's happened to build cars. People don't go to Toyota to work, they go there to think. And I was sharing that middle one with my undergraduate students. Today, when you go to problem solve, go and see. So in other words, go to the process instead of assuming something happened from a meeting room. Go see with your own eyes. Ask why the problem happened, not who did the mistake, to get to the root cause and show respect to people at all levels. So people-centric culture, we're here to develop people and we just happen to make cars or whatever it is. So some different approaches that we've seen. We talked about what management is, what engineering is, what engineering management is. I wanted to kind of hit some fun approaches that I've seen that are some more effective than others that you might can relate to just to kind of get us going. And then I want to introduce radical candor as kind of the last thing tonight, because that's the book we're going to kind of kick off with. So radical candor, the structure of the book, there's 8 chapters. And they're kind of, so chapter 1 and chapter 5 go together. If you're wondering why I like the reading so scattered, the front half of the book, chapters 1 through 4, is the theoretical part, the theoretical framework. And then the back half are more tools that you can use to help you. So chapter 1 introduces radical candor, and chapter 5 kind of goes with it. Chapter 2 will talk about guidance and feedback. Chapter 6 will give you tools to help you with that. And chapter 3 and 7 and 4. So that's kind of how it's laid out. But radical candor is a framework of how to lead and be a boss based on 2 axes. There's 2 dimensions. There's the care personally axis. Kim Scott calls it the give a damn axis. To what degree do I, as a boss, care personally about each member on my team? And what does that mean? Versus, how willing am I to challenge directly? The willingness to push people to achieve. And depending on where I rank on each of those, the approach I take, I might fall into one of 4 categories. If I'm willing to challenge someone directly, but I don't care personally about them, that is called obnoxious aggression. Only results matter. You're just cog in the machine. On the flip side, I may care personally, but may not be willing to push someone and challenge them directly, and that's called ruinous empathy. I want to be your buddy, let you get by with stuff. If I don't do either, I don't care about you and I'm not willing to push you. That's called manipulative insincerity. Or if I do both well, what we're striving toward, radical candor is caring personally, understanding what that really means, but still being willing to challenge directly and realizing that if I'm not willing to challenge you directly, I probably don't actually care about you as your boss. So that's the whole premise of radical candor. She introduces the framework in chapter 1. And then it talks about radical candor is how I go about my job as a manager, a leader. She uses the word boss because it's just very, by definition, this is what you are. And she says the 3 responsibilities of a boss, according to radical candor, are to get results. Right, that's part of it. I was just watching before I came to class. It's coach firing season in football. So I was just looking, oh, you don't get results, you get fired. But in her world, hopefully that's not the only responsibility of management. I also have the responsibility of building teams and giving and receiving guidance to help develop my people. So those are the 3 responsibilities according to radical candor, and these are different ways that, based on behaviors that individuals take, they may go about fulfilling those 3 responsibilities. So that's kind of the gist and the layout of the book. So chapter 2, we'll look at guidance. Chapter 3, team building, and chapter 4, we'll look at results. So that's the way the book is laid out. These are the 3 responsibilities of a boss. Ideally, we strive to fulfill those through radical candor, caring personally while still willing to challenge directly each member of our team. And so in chapter 5 and chapter 1, she talks about how the best way to go about that, and the goal of radical candor is to develop strong and trusting relationships with our folks, our people, our team. Because being a boss, being in a management position is not easy. And it's very often not fun. But the degree that we can develop trusting relationships helps us fulfill those three responsibilities. If I have stronger trusting relationships, the chances of me getting results, building strong teams, my feedback and guidance being received properly are much greater based on the strength of my relationships. And the way I go about fulfilling my responsibilities also dictates how strong those relationships are because people are observing the way I do. What really made me decide to adopt this book for this class was immediately in chapter 1, very first paragraph. Kim Scott, the author, talks about she's in an executive role, CEO, of a tech startup. The engineering team was rolling out a new product, and she was wanting to make a change to the pricing. She was trying to get to her office to do some analysis on that. She talked about walking through the office and all the different things that happened that stopped her. She stopped and talked to one employee who just found out they needed a kidney transplant. So that was an exhausting conversation. Then on to the next person. She knew one of her employees had a child that was in the emergency rooms. Okay, I'll go check in with them, see how things are going. Things hadn't improved. Next person, as she's on the way, stops. Hey, guess what? My kid got the highest score on their test in school, like positive thing. She said by the time she got to her office, she was exhausted. And she hadn't even done any, quote, real work yet. I was like, yeah, been there, understand it. I don't like to. So she said she called up her coach. She had a CEO coach, yes, helping her develop as a leader. And she was complaining and she said, I haven't even gotten to do all the real work. How am I supposed to get results when I'm just emotionally babysitting? And her coach said, it's not babysitting. It's called management. It's your job. So very often what happens, and I've fallen victim to this, especially as engineers, where we have been the technical person and then we get promoted, especially if we aren't trained on what it means to be a leader or manager, we tend to want to go right back to that technical side and we view that as our job. We don't view the management task and the people-oriented task as the real work. We view it as something we have to do to get out of the way so we can go do the real work. Well, if you've been promoted from the one doing the real work, your job is now not to do that, but to manage and lead the people that are doing that. That's a mindset change. It's difficult. There's a lot of labor, emotional labor is the term she used, that goes into being a boss. And sometimes we undervalue that. We don't, if you're in that position, you don't realize that that is the work. So it takes effort to develop the skills to be able to do that. So it all turns into how do I build trusting relationships with my people so I can accomplish those responsibilities and understand that that now is my job. That as soon as I read that first chapter, I'm like, this is it. This is why engineering management exists. Because engineers that screw up and get promoted, and now we've got to be over people. And like, if I'm not, very often, most organizations don't have a way. They don't tell you what that means. Congratulations, you've been promoted. You're the team leader over this group of engineers. Okay, what does that mean? You show up tomorrow and you've got a new job title. You might get a little bit of a raise, a lot more responsibility, and we might not even backfill the person, the position that we promoted you for. And if it may not be immediate, so then you show up maybe and you just do what you did before a little hard with your new set of responsibilities, and it's hard to let go of the old stuff. You may not get mentored on the new stuff or even know what you're supposed to do. I don't know if any of y'all can do that, but I see it in a lot of places, not everywhere. So understanding what our responsibilities are, then hey, our job now is to build trusting relationships so I can accomplish this. Because without trusting relationships, if you try to give and receive feedback to members on your team without a trusting relationship, good luck. I ask people in my research center, hey, give me some feedback. What can I do better? What can I do to help you do your job? What's your opinion on things we should do? If I don't have trust, what am I going to get? Nothing. If I give them feedback, if I don't have trust, it's probably going to be dismissed or discounted, or if anything, only check the box to make it look like they're doing it. So I stay off. And so the degree that we can build those relationships cannot be overlooked. It is the key. Like I said, the relationships that we have directly connect to how well we can accomplish our responsibilities. So in chapters 1 and 5, she recommends 3 things that you can do to help build trusting relationships: staying centered with yourself, keeping equal footing with the members on your team, and mastering the art of socializing at work. And I'll let you read through some of those, but staying centered is, she talks about bringing your best self to work, but also taking your best self home. And I'll go into that a little deeper here in a moment. Then also providing an environment for your team where each person can bring their best self to work and take their best self home. And how to master the art of socializing at work. And what that means for a boss and how important that is for your role. Understanding everybody has different values. Not everybody has to have the same values. They won't. Have respect for that. Find out what your organizational values are and how do you align that. Understanding that what means recognition for one person may not mean recognition for another person. And understanding that sometimes off-site non-mandatory events may be perceived as mandatory, and just being understanding of that and the role that you carry with that as a leader. But I want to spend personally some time on this last topic. Being centered as an individual and the importance that is on you fulfilling your responsibilities as a leader. Because I have struggled with this, and there were some good points that this book has helped me with. Staying centered, she defined as being able to bring your best self to work, because if you can't bring your best self to work, the chances of you being able to fulfill your responsibilities are less. And if you're scattered, you're undependable, you're probably not building trusting relationships. So how do we do that? But then also preserve that you also deserve to take your best self back home and not compromise that for work, and understanding what that looks like for you. So she uses this word, and like another one of those that made me step back and go, work-life integration. What do we typically hear? What's the term we typically hear?
Work-life balance.
Yeah, work-life balance, right? Companies will even promote that. UAH, I saw it on their HR site. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing y'all wanted from me. Work-life balance. And in Radical Candor, she talks about how that gives the illusion of some zero-sum game that you have to take away from one to give to the other. Whereas if you can integrate work life, and that doesn't mean make it your life or intermingle them, but what it means is if I can have a work life where I bring my best self to work and take my best self home, it will also probably give me a healthier home life that kind of gives you the double boost to both. You can't ignore that one does influences the other, because they do. So figure out what that looks like for you. She talked about how she had defined, I need to be able to have, if I can have this couple of weeks of vacation and be able to do this, then if I can do that, I'm pretty well balanced. And what does that look like for you? For me, a lot of times it's just sticking to the third bullet there was something that stood out to me. Identify what those things you need to be your best self are and actually put them on your calendar just like you do appointments with other people. For me, it was working out. When I get busy with work, it was easy for me to convince myself that work is more important and put that off. And so then I started realizing the more I stick that, the less happy I am. I feel worse about myself, and it actually is influencing my work that I thought was so important that I would put that off. So I started putting it on my calendar. Then you have to have the discipline to, just like any other appointment that I make, if I book it, I'm going to respect their time and show up and be there for that appointment. Do the same for yourself. And that's what she's talking about with work-life integration is if you can do those things for yourself, then the chances of you bringing your best self to work are much greater. But then also take on the responsibility to bring yourself best self back home as well by making time for yourself and balancing work, but it's not taking away. It's both they're boosting each other because if you don't, both will negatively influence each other as well because they do impact. Life doesn't happen anymore. I don't know if it ever did, but more and more, life doesn't happen in 3 neat little 8-hour buckets of work, personal life, and sleep. Or maybe it does for you. It doesn't for me. Like, there's holes in those buckets, and that water gets mixed very, very easily. And so, there's some good advice in there. But all of it is if I can't bring my best self to work, I can't be the best boss and develop people into their best. So I just wanted to introduce the course, go over the way it's structured, some of the nuts and bolts of that. I wanted to introduce the topic of engineering management. We touched on that, looked at some management approaches, and get into the first chapter of Radical Candor, which was introducing the Radical Candor framework. The 4 quadrants, identifying the responsibilities, the 3 key responsibilities of a boss, getting results, obviously, but also building teams and giving and receiving guidance. And then we'll look at each of those skills throughout the semester. But next week, we're going to look specifically at chapters 2 and 6, which is giving and receiving feedback or guidance. And then we'll assign the case study because that's the skill that we're going to work on throughout the multiple phases of the case study as well. So you'll have about 2 weeks per phase. You'll get the assignment in about 2 weeks to develop your case study and write it. Then 2 weeks to do the written peer review. And I think we hit spring break. But then there's 3 weeks to revise and then do the one-on-one sessions, the 2-way sessions, and then another 2 weeks to do the final thing. So it kind of stretches through the semester. What do you think? Any questions or comments or anything? Like I said, when left to my own, I will talk. So I do it for a living. Love interaction.
I got a comment.
Yes,
On your archetypes, you forgot about seagull management.
the seagull.
Ever heard that one?
Yeah. Sparks.
The fly things.
Shits all over everything. Yeah. We'll run into those two. Like, yeah, good week. It's nice to meet y'all. Look forward to a good semester. And nothing else. I'll see you next Tuesday. I haven't gotten into Canvas. Go play around with it. Hope stuff in a lot of fun.
Yeah.